Diggsy is going to the Texans, along with a 5th rounder and a 6th rounder for a 2025 second round pick. What's your reaction to this deal?
Everybody blows Bills news and anything relating to Josh Allen news way out of proportion. There's just never a middle ground with Josh Allen or the Bills, man. The Bills' Super Bowl window is not closed. Buffalo had a major overhaul this offseason. That is true. They lost a lot of veterans. They're going to be fine. And as Carson liked to remind us during the NFL season last year, Diggs was not playing like a number one in the back half of this season and in the playoffs. From after Week 10, this is an 8-game sample size, half of a season, Diggs averaged 43.6 receiving yards per game. He had 37 catches for 349 yards and a touchdown. For reference, that is way outside the top 25 and the 30 of the top receivers in that span. He was not playing like a number one. And then in the playoffs, he had a good game versus Pittsburgh. And then against the Chiefs, he had 3 catches for 21 yards on 8 targets. And the play that we're all going to remember from that game is the ball going through his hands on that shot play where Josh Allen delivered a perfect pass. Yeah. And what all coaches will tell you, what all football people will tell you, if it hits you in the hands, you better catch it. There's no excuses. You got to catch that ball. And I think they got great value for Stefon Diggs. This is a guy who's not getting any better. He is 31 years old. He has apparently been disgruntled for all of the last 3 to 4 off seasons. Again, I don't know if there's merit to those rumors. We've dispelled them for some time, but normally when there's smoke, there's fire. You got a second-round pick for that guy. Again, a guy who is not getting any better. He is on the decline now. You're going to have to pay him again if you want to hold on to him. This is phenomenal value for a wide receiver. Now, you mentioned this, Carson, I believe in a tweet, or you texted me. You said it would have been much nicer to have in this year's draft, obviously, where you could replace him immediately. And I quite like this year's receiving class, where if you could couple that pick with another later round pick and move into the first round and get one of the top guys and get a number one, or where you could just take another second round guy. Again, I really like this year's receiving class. It's a second round pick. That's great value, man. Again, you're not going to have to pay him. You're not going to have this. Josh Allen has been the second best quarterback in football for some time now behind Patrick Mahomes. One of the best offensive engines in football. Up there with Mahomes, with Burrow, with Lamar. And it doesn't matter. You know, I'm not saying that Stefon Diggs doesn't matter. He was great. Him and Josh were a great QB wideout duo. But when you have a quarterback of this caliber, I am of the belief that you can give him Joe Schmo, and he's going to make him good. He got Gabe Davis paid this last offseason, man. Do you know how hard it is to get Gabe Davis paid? Yes, there's a lot of change, and change is scary because we don't know what the outcome is going to be when there's a lot of change. So there's a lot of variables, and there's a lot of moving parts here with the Buffalo Bills offseason. But you know what part that is staying? It's the main cog of the machine, and his name is Josh Allen. And the Bills are going to be fine. They're going to win the AFC East. They're going to make the playoffs. And guess what? We're probably going to get Bills-Chiefs again if Josh Allen stays healthy. So we can all stay away from the panic button. The Bills are going to be fine. And in my humble opinion, I think they absolutely crushed this trade. To get a second-round pick for an aging receiver is a home run hit. I think the Bills crushed this. I think they've done a very good job this offseason. I think a lot of this is getting blown out of proportion, and I think the Bills are going to be a very, very good football team next year and a Super Bowl contender.
It's really surprised me, the reaction to all this stuff, which is the sky is falling, the Bills are rebuilding, and I do think it speaks to some people being a bit removed from the specifics of what's going on in Buffalo, right? Trey White, I love the guy, but he's an aging corner who can't stay healthy. Shout out Micah Hyde. Shout out Jordan Poyer. Both aging and regressing old safeties. And now you're talking about Diggs, who, has been a bedrock of this offense for years, but also took a step back this year. And you mentioned, over the last 12 games of the year, dude, 2/3 of the season, he was outproduced by both Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. Of course, he's still the number one receiver. He's still demanding number one receiver attention. But He wasn't playing like one of the elite receivers in football. And the notion that he isn't replaceable in this current form with some first round receiver in this year's loaded class at a much better dollar value, that just doesn't make sense to me. The scary thing is, Diggs, even if he's not the player that he was a couple years ago, is a sure thing. It is a sure thing that he's a number one receiver, and you could always miss in the draft. You could say, hey, these first-round receivers are so great. The hit rate on them is high in recent years, but you could always be the guy who takes Jalen Reagor. You could always be the guy who takes Corey Coleman.
Let's take Quentin Johnston,
You could always be the guy who takes Quentin Johnston, and that's the scary thing. But I still think that this is the right move because ultimately, this is the direction of this Bills team. This is the theme of the offseason. And this is what I wanted the theme of the offseason to be. Shedding these big names who are old, who in some cases have health concerns. That's not really the case for Diggsy, but are just generally trending downwards and getting younger and getting better value because that's going to be the theme of this Josh Allen era. It's going to be about value propositions. You have your superstar quarterback with a big cap hit, and he can restructure and do whatever as he did this year, but it's going to be about value and paying the right people appropriate amounts. And I just think that Diggs' contract at his age, considering that there is lingering drama there, it exceeds his actual value on the football field at this point. So they have to nail receiver in the first round. I think that is absolutely essential. And overall, I mean, they're just going to have to keep drafting well, right? That is why I'm not as high on the value as you are, Logan. I'm okay with it. But I really would prefer a second rounder to be this year because I like the vision of, hey, all right, we have these older, expensive dudes. We're going to move off of them. And so maybe they aren't the best value propositions at this stage in this career, but they're still good football players. And you have to replace those good football players. And I'd like to do that this offseason because the Bills want to win every single year. The Bills' expectation every single year is win the division, win a playoff game, if not more. So having to wait a year to reap the rewards of losing a guy who, even if he took a step back, is still one of your best players, that's where I don't love it. And attaching a fifth and a sixth, it's not the best value, but I like the vision broadly, and I don't hate the value. So overall, I think people who are viewing this as a major loss for the Bills are missing the bigger picture. I'm not even sure that the relationship between Diggs and Allen and the organization was really tenable for that much longer. Like last year, I tried to say, oh, this stuff is overblown. But I think throughout this year, like you can only see Trayvon Diggs talk about how his brother wants a trade and should come to Dallas so many times. And you can only see so many subtweets from Diggs before you're like, all right, obviously there is not just smoke, there is fire here. And that just kind of seems to be the reality with Diggsy. It's like you get a couple years and then he's like, all right, I'm done with you. It doesn't matter if he's playing with a top 2 quarterback. It doesn't matter if he has an overwhelming target share as he did for 3.5 years. He's going to be pissed. But that's the thing. When the offense became less Diggs-centric, when it wasn't all about the Allen-Diggs connection, when they started to lean more on the running game and Shakir and Dalton Kincaid, the offense was running smoothly. The offense was humming. So it doesn't have to be all about Diggs. And I think that there was value in seeing how the offense could thrive, not without him, but without him doing as much as he had been when you're talking about moving to a future without him.
And on the biggest stage, who was the guy that let him down? The ball went through Diggs' hands. Like, I'm not saying, I'm not putting all this on him, but it's also like you got to be that guy that wears a little bit more of the loss.
And also, Josh is just going to elevate anybody, dude.
Yeah.
That's the reality with these great quarterbacks, right? I saw somebody compare it to, like, 2015 Cam, the Bills' current receiving core. And it does look that way. I mean, it's Curtis Samuel right now and Khalil Shakir competing to be wide receiver 1. They're going to take a receiver high in the draft, but that is the current situation. But I just think Josh does so much to stress a defense. It's like what we've seen with Lamar in recent years, right? The weapons improved this year, but even when they weren't great, he is just such a freak talent that he is going to carry that offense. And you need to put the right pieces around that guy to reach their ceiling. Maybe if you want to win the Super Bowl with anybody other than Patrick Mahomes, and even in his case, then you need to give him an elite defense to compensate for that lack of elite offensive talent. But the notion that this team that has a good defensive infrastructure, that has the resources to replenish some of these positions, and that overall is moving off of players who weren't at their peaks is just going to fall off a cliff is incorrect. The Bills are probably going to win the division. They're probably going to win a playoff game because they have Josh Allen, and that's the biggest thing. And they have a good defensive coach and good defensive personnel.
Yeah, on the flip side of this, I'm not scratching my head about Houston doing this, but I don't fully understand it. I do think Stefon's going to come in here and be the number one. But, I mean, I really liked Nico Collins last year. I thought Nico balled out. I really liked Tank Dell last year. And so, I don't know, wide receiver wasn't really a position I thought of like super high need for Houston, but I understand getting another reliable presence, another guy that's going to take number one responsibilities, hopefully open up the rest of the field. And, you know, Stroud's a great quarterback. He's going to utilize Stefon. When Diggs is open, he's going to find him. You know what I mean? Stroud's just awesome. He's elite. And so he's going from one elite quarterback to another. And I think he's going to eat in Houston. My thing is when you're giving up a second-round pick, it's exactly what you said about the money. A lot of this comes down to money decisions, right? If the Chargers could have held on to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams in the offseason, they would have. But those guys had $20 million plus cap hits. And that's where I come down with an issue with Houston. It's not about the talent level that Diggs is at or really the need or, you know, the availability. It's more about the money that they're going to have to pay Diggs in the futures. If you want him to stick around and have not just given up a second-round pick for nothing, you are going to have to pay Diggs. And I just don't know about paying an aging receiver $15-20 million plus at this backstage of his career when we know that slope is really dangerous when it hits, man. It's tough. I think it's overblown in some scenarios, and obviously every player is different, but that 29, 30, 31-year-old mark for running backs and wideouts is a very scary one, and Diggs looked like he had taken a little bit of a step back, man. So it really comes down to the money for me about paying Diggs in the future and where I'm worried about it for Houston. But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt going out and getting another weapon for your star quarterback. And I think he's going to be very successful in Houston as well, man. So I think it's a little bit of a win-win on both sides. But if you're asking me who won the trade, I think Buffalo did. I think they got better value back.
Oh, wow. I am a lot higher on this trade for Houston than you are for a few reasons. I really like their receiver situation too. I was beyond pleasantly surprised with the play of Nico Collins and Tank Dell last year. I still don't think you can go wrong adding more star receiver talent to support your star young quarterback. Like, I just think they're putting CJ in a position to crush it. I also think these are two teams that are in very different situations just in terms of their freedom to allocate cap, largely because one player has a top 10 quarterback on a rookie deal. The other one has a superstar quarterback, but he is on a massive deal. And so Houston is in a position where I think they still had like $30 million in cap before taking on this Diggs deal. And you're talking about trading him for nothing, but they have control of him through 2027 if they want. So that's 3 years, and that's kind of the perfect out, because then I wouldn't give him another contract. At that point, he's too old.
They can also, I didn't realize this, they can cut him after this season, and all of it is dead cap.
They have an out. So I like it, and I don't think the value in terms of draft capital is too much. You give up a second next year, you get back a fifth and a sixth on top of this star player. I just don't see why Houston wouldn't do it. Like, they have their foundational young pieces, Nico Collins, CJ Stroud, Derek Stingley, Will Anderson, these guys who are just bona fide studs, and they don't have to pay any of them like elite players yet. So why wouldn't you go out and get a Daniil Hunter? Why wouldn't you go out and get a Stefon Diggs? I just think that's a great approach to this offseason, and this team is terrifying right now. They're terrifying. I think that they have one of the most imposing duos of pass rushers in football. I think that they are incredibly well coached. Now they have one of the best receiving cores and this incredibly gifted ascending young quarterback. Houston is gonna win the division. Jacksonville just does not scare me like they do. I know Anthony Richardson is coming back and what have you. Like, this team is pretty loaded, dude. And I think if anybody's gonna make some noise, obviously Kansas City and Baltimore are just absolutely loaded. But outside of that, Buffalo still has to be in that conversation. Healthy Cincinnati has to be in that conversation. but Houston might be number 3 in the AFC. And so when you're in a position to add star talent and it doesn't really hurt you against the cap in a meaningful way, I just say go ahead and do it. And that's where Houston is, and that's a fun spot to be for a couple years because windows change fast in the NFL. And you should always be stockpiling talent when you have the opportunity to give yourself a puncher's chance for that year or two, whatever it may be. And Houston's done that.
Yeah, the AFC is going to be cutthroat.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not ready to make any like big time. Obviously, Kansas City is at the top of my hierarchy right now with Baltimore. And they're still my 1 and 2. The AFC is going to be a war for the next 5 years, man. We talked about this a lot, but Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, Rodgers is in the division for this year. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, all of the top quarterback talent in the AFC. Of course, Russell Wilson, all of the top quarterback talent is in the AFC right now. It's gonna be a battle year in, year out. I obviously say Russell Wilson tongue in cheek, but I mean,
yes, one of your classic jests. Low Jokester is back at it, folks.
It's gonna be a battle, man. And the Texans now have upgraded their firepower. Yeah, the Texans are scary, man. The Texans are scary. I do think it's their division, and ironically, man, they have completely leapfrogged Jacksonville. It's so funny to me. It's the Urban Meyer ripple effect, in my opinion, man. I'm serious. You took away T-Law's rookie year, like a real rookie year under a real head coach and a real coordinator with a real team, and it's just taken a lot to rebuild and to get back to that point. You started in a negative hole, and the Texans have leapfrogged them. And Indianapolis too is going to be a tough out. You know what I mean? Like Jacksonville may have gotten done in by 2 teams in their division, and I think Houston is the front runner, man. The Texans are a real contender out in the AFC, as are a lot of teams. That's why I say it's wide open next year. But Houston's for real. Houston's very for real.
Yeah, dude. And I mean the depth of weapons. Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz, also on the defensive front, adding to Nico Autry this year. Like, they've had a hell of an offseason, man. They had the toys to play with, and they have taken advantage of it so far. And we haven't even gotten to the draft yet, man, so it'll be fun to see what they do there as well.